All right, welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, and we are in mid-November. It is crunch time. It is award season, and big commercial films are coming up on the horizon, so we've got a lot to talk about. There's some smaller films coming out that are going to be more awards worthy I'm going to be talking about today, as well as some big ones that are going to be coming out for the Thanksgiving season. So obviously the big film we're going to talk about today is going to be Wicked for Good, the sequel to last year's Wicked. Of course, returning once more for another Thanksgiving to dominate. We'll also be talking about Hamnet, the film based on the film inspired by William Shakespeare's wife, and how she dealt with the grief of her child and her husband's production of the play Hamlet. It's going to be opening in limited release this Thanksgiving and going to be expanding into December, so that's going to be the earliest review on this show. But there might be a few others. Like, we're also going to be talking about Little Amelie, or The Character of Rain, an animated film about a French girl who grew up in Japan, a 2D animated film that's going to be coming out later this year from G-Kids. We'll also be talking about the documentary Being Eddie, which is all about Eddie Murphy. I don't need any more explanation than that. We'll also be talking about the new animated film on Netflix called In Your Dreams by Alex Wu, a former Pixar story editor, and this is going to be the directorial debut of Alex, so we'll see if it's any good. And finally, we're also going to be talking about a smaller film called Put Your Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk. That's what I say. A documentary about filming the exploits of a photojournalist within Gaza during Israel's assault on the city. So we're going to be covering an important documentary, a celeb documentary, Hamnet, a film that's definitely going to be an awards contender, and we'll be covering some animated films as well as the top musical. So we've got a lot that we've got to cover today. But before we get to any of that, if you'd like to keep up to date on the latest movies, because you will want to stay up to date, because next week I'm going to be doing a review of Zootopia 2. In fact, I saw Zootopia 2 today. It's just the embargo doesn't drop until Tuesday, so I can't talk about it right now. But if you come back Tuesday, I will talk about it then, and you can get an early review of that before it drops on Thanksgiving. So be sure that you're subscribed to keep up to date on that stuff, and be sure to like this video so that other people can learn about Hamnet before it comes out later this year. And be sure to check out my Patreon as well, in which I'm writing video essays on banned movies right now. It's been a little slower, but it's getting done. They're getting through there. Amelie is Belgian. Why do I think Belgian? I guess because like they had French in there. Yeah, but yeah, it's Belgian. Thank you, Anna, for correcting me. Thank you. I had it in my notes here too. I should have brought up my notes immediately before I did that. Okay. So I've wasted enough time here. Oh, also be sure to check out movieswithmark.com if you want to see written reviews of anything that I've talked about here today. Okay, so obviously we'll get to the top one that everyone wants to know about. Is the Wicked sequel any good? So let me get my notes up here. Get some water here. I had a separate one for my water because I ran out. Okay, here we go with a review of Wicked for Good. Hopefully it's the last one for good. In 3, 2, 1. So Wicked for Good is the sequel to last year's Wicked, which brings to a close the story of Glinda and Elphaba, and whether or not their friendship will be able to survive the odd circumstances that they've been placed within, with Glinda being recognized as the enemy, and, Glinda being recognized as royalty, and Elphaba being made out to be the evil witch that everyone in Oz should either fear or stop at all costs. Now, I really liked the first film just because I felt like it did have a good balance of kind of like the musical exuberance and the decadence of this fantasy setting, but still had a thematic core to it. Like, there was still a lot of interesting stuff in there, like, animals being persecuted, trying to rewrite history, authoritarians being in control, a friendship that becomes more complicated through politics, romance that becomes more complicated through politics. Lots of good stuff happened in that first film. And unfortunately, in the second film, it can't quite balance the theatrics with the thematics as much. Like, it really does feel like they're leaning more into just the music and the fantasy of it all, and not really like, you know, exploring more of what you can do with this Oz setting and how you can make it feel more politically resonant. It feels like this film set up all these plot lines, and then, you know, they've only got so much time left in this story that they have to wrap everything up as quickly as they can with a neat little bow. And if that means even just, you know, plot lines petering out, or just or just like arriving at like an easy resolve, then so be it. That's what they're going to end up doing here. It definitely has that feel of a TV series that is coming to an end, and the creatives are not quite sure how to bring it to a close, and what they tend to do is just focus on what is the most important theme, and will just, like, you know, cut everything off and veer straight on that. And in this case, it is the friendship between Elphaba, with, you know, Cynthia Erivo returning to the role, and Ariana Grande once more playing Glinda. The film is all about their friendship, but unfortunately, it doesn't really spend as much time with them. And the problem with the film is that it wants to do so much with this material, not just with like the friendship between Elphaba and Glinda, but also with the love triangle between them, with Fiyero, played by Jonathan Bailey, which I thought was compelling, but we don't spend enough time with him to see Fiyero's conflicting nature about serving in the Guard with Oz and being more dedicated to Elphaba. It felt like there should be more conflict with him, but there isn't as much of that here. And it feels like very weird how the film will just kind of lean into the theatrics of it. Like when we first see Glinda, she's in this royal role and she's just accepting it. You know, she's once more, you know, this popular figure who's in like a higher role in society, and she's just playing it up with all the glam and the musical numbers, and you're just like, oh, she's, you know, it's got that like cute look to her, and she's got that glitzy, glamorous style to her, and the film just kind of like drinks her in for a bit. But I'm like, shouldn't she be a little bit conflicted about Elphaba? And you're kind of just watching her slowly come to the realization that, yeah, Oz is corrupt, even though it's kind of obvious from the beginning here. But I think the problem is, like, the film gets so lost in just like all the decadence and the musical numbers that often forgets about it. At one point, there's a scene where Glinda and Elphaba both try to strike a deal with Oz, and they just get lost in this music and dance number, which feels wildly off in how it's assembled here. Like, I never quite got the idea that Oz is that much of a charmer that Elphaba and Glinda could easily just kind of, you know, go along with like the song and dance number here. I think you gotta work a little bit harder to, you know, to understand why the characters would be a little bit more dazzled by this. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some fairly good set pieces. In fact, the sequence with Oz, once more played by Jeff Goldblum, I thought that was a really neat sequence, but thematically, you're just asking yourself, wait a minute, it doesn't Elphaba consider Oz the enemy here? And why is she just kind of going along with the musical number? It almost feels like she just had to kind of go with the flow instead of being more rebellious. But the film just doesn't have time for it. And it's weird because, like, it's almost like 2.5 hours, and it feels like this film wants to do everything and ends up doing nothing. Because there's still that subplot of animals being persecuted and forced into slavery. So there very much is like an immigration angle there with how the animals want to depart Oz because they don't feel safe there anymore, which, interesting angle, but doesn't really go much further than that, other than just, you know, showing the animals leaving. Elphaba is still conflicted about her powers. In many cases, she's trying to use them to try to right the wrongs and ends up screwing them up. And I felt like there should be more time for that. There also should be more time for the romance that she has with Fiyero, which it feels so inexplicable. Like, it arrives at this moment where there's this romantic duet between the two of them, as they're just about ready to get into bed and have like a love scene together. And it just, I kept thinking during the scene, it's like, okay, this is a decent number, but it's rushed so much that it's just like, even like, I get the feeling, shouldn't like Fiyero almost be like, I don't know, I think we're kind of moving pretty fast here, but that's the entire film at this point. Everything is moving so fast that there's not a moment to just like to drink in the world of Oz and frame a better allegory, as opposed to just, finding ways to either resolve the plot lines or just cut them off cold. In particular, I was very stunned that they really did cut off the relationship between Bach and Nessa. Bach, once more played by Ethan Slater, and Nessa, played by Marissa Bode. That they do have like an interesting dynamic where like they show how a corruption of power can complicate that relationship, and you can't force someone to love you. But it just kind of feels like broad strokes with them, and it never, like, there's a lot to explore with that relationship, and it never quite feels there. And it also, like, especially when Elphaba's thrown into the mix, it just kind of reveals this big problem of how they have to maintain the status quo of adding Dorothy into the mix. Because once Dorothy is in the story, well, she doesn't really dominate the story, but she's always in the background, and it feels like everything has to center around her after that point, that it feels like every other relationship and conflict and political development just gets sidelined so that everything can line up perfectly here, and try to find like a resolve for how we got the Tin Man, how we got the Scarecrow, how Oz and how the great and powerful Oz ended up leaving his land. It's like all these explanations for questions I do not care about in the original Wizard of Oz. Not to mention, I wish this film took more risks, because think about this for a minute. This film is based on a musical, which is a revision of a novel, which is also a revision of a novel. Which, if you want to make it even more complicated, the original novel also had a bit of a revision in the original classic film as well. But, if you're having revisions of revisions of revisions, why not experiment more? Why not do something radically different with this material? Because the way that it proceeds here, I've heard from a lot of people say this, that, yeah, this is pretty much the same way that the stage production ends. And it's like, yeah, that's very dissatisfying, though. And it's like, couldn't someone like look at it at that point just like, well, this doesn't feel like it's working. Could we change this up? I mean, yeah, would fans be disappointed? Probably, but it would still be it would still give them something to talk about, instead of just being like, oh yeah, that's how the stage production goes. Because it's very unsatisfying here, and there's so much wasted potential with this. Like, consider this. Okay, so they do have talking animals in the film, and they do show one of the winged monkeys. I think his name is Chistery, I think, and he's voiced by D. Bradley Baker. Now, D. Bradley Baker, he does a lot of cartoon voices. He's done tons of roles. He's kind of like a Billy West or DiMaggio. He does tons of voices, so it makes sense that you just bring in a standard voice actor who could do a talking animal. But then, for the Cowardly Lion here, they have him voiced by Coleman Domingo, and he doesn't really have much of any scenes, and they don't really play up this character in a way that makes you care about it. It's like, you have Coleman Domingo in this film, and you're wasting him on just a handful of lines. It just, it feels like such a waste. It felt like there was an opportunity to do something very revolutionary with this material here and switch it up, instead of just sticking to the status quo of both like the musical and Wizard of Oz at the same time. And it just comes off very, very unfulfilling the way that it's framed here. Now, to the film's credit, director John M. Chu, he does have some decent sequences here. I like some of the choreography. I in particular, I did like a sequence where Glinda is contemplating her decisions in song as she ambles around her kind of like palace quarters, and there's a great use of like reflections of like pulling in and pulling out and distorting your perspective here and there. I thought that was a pretty nice sequence. But it's a nice sequence if you divorce it from the fact that Glinda is only slowly starting to see beyond all like the fashion and the fame and just the power that she holds, to realize that, yeah, she's actually hurting her friend and isn't doing enough. In the same way that I don't think the film is doing enough. I don't feel like it's playing off the material that well here. I feel like everything is just kind of trying to neatly align itself so that it perfectly syncs up with the Wizard of Oz, which, like, who cares? Because I didn't care about like the status quo. We don't really spend that much time with Dorothy. We don't really care about how this would line up as a side story because the first film did very much feel like a prequel that was trying to toy around with some stuff, while the sequel film For Good feels like it's very much a side story and strictly sticking to a side story to the point where there's this very off tone to everything. Like Nessa at one point is used as as an establishment of like the red shoes that Dorothy will get, and the way that it proceeds, especially with like Elphaba grappling with a death in the family, it feels wildly inappropriate that it goes from that sequence to this very silly scene where Glinda and Elphaba are fighting each other, and it's meant to be like comical and has like some levity to it, but it's levity right after death and grief was right there, and then just kind of and just inexplicably Glinda just sticks to the script here, and it feels like Elphaba should be more angry and not just playing up the role that she's given here. At one point she just does the witch cackle for no other reason other than the fact that that's the role that she's accepted. I'm also really not a big fan of the way that the film ends with trying to basically the ending leads more towards utilitarianism. We're realizing that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, so we got to be devoted to the people of Oz and sacrifice herself. It left a bitter taste in my mouth that the film had to end on that note of realizing that that you have to work within the system, even though the system here is pretty damn rotten. That the way that Glinda kind of like finds like the perfect way to kind of like stick to, basically she gets to have her cake and eat it too, whereas Elphaba has to kind of like go more off grid as the film ends here and kind of like stay there and realize that she is a little bit too dangerous instead of like sticking around to be more of herself. It was so dissatisfying the way that the film ended there. Not to mention, even on like a theatrical level, there are no, aside from like Oz's little menagerie of weird inventions and everything like that, there wasn't a set that I really gravitated towards in this film. Like in the first film, I really liked the design of the little library they had at the academy. I thought that was really cool design. I like how it played off with the dance choreography. There wasn't a scene like that for me in this film. There wasn't even a catchy song, and I think for a lot of people that is going to be like a big deal breaker here, is that the songs are really not that good here. That they're sung fairly well by both like Arrivo and Grande, but there's none that are going to like stick in my head, or that a lot of there's no earworms here. There's nothing that I'm gonna, be humming along as like I leave the theater or think about like a month from now. It evaporated so quickly, and just for the fact that I wasn't really on board with where this story was going. The more that it went, it became so much harder to be involved and it became so much harder to be engaged with the film as it just kept going along, and just like it had these like good but not great musical numbers and some decent set pieces and some mild levity here and there that I thought was okay, but politically and thematically, it's such a mess with how it just like lets certain plot lines peter out and then just kind of easily resolves all these conflicts on this very dissatisfying level. So yeah, Wicked for Good is in very stark contrast to the first film. Like, I enjoyed the first film because it felt like it had a good story and some good theatrics to it, but Wicked for Good, it has the theatrics mostly, but good story, it's not really there. So Wicked for Good will be playing in theaters this weekend. We still going there? Yep, we are. Okay. Yeah. It was such a disappointment, that film. And just, I didn't even go in like wanting to hate it. I was just hoping it could pay off its thematics and still have like cool set pieces and decent music. And it really disappointed me, which is unfortunate. I don't want to bang on the film, but it's not good, Okay, let's see. What do we got next here? One moment here. I'm gonna get some mints here to clear my throat a little bit. But we'll be coming up here on some better films. I can assure you most of the films that we're going to talk about after this are much better. So, if you are disappointed in Wicked, or at least my review of Wicked, don't worry. There are some much better films I have to recommend. So, stick around for that. See, I gotta get some water here. Sorry, I gotta get the mint through my system just so I can maintain it. Because we got a lot of films to cover today. Alright. Okay, so let's get to the next film. Yeah, we got coming up here. And that is Hamnet. Little Shakespearean drama for your Thanksgiving. So for those wondering, Hamnet will actually be coming out next week on Thanksgiving in limited release. So it's probably going to be in your art house theaters. And I believe it's going to be expanding on December 12th, I believe. So yeah, we're almost like for most people, like this is going to be like a month in review. But it's definitely one to keep in mind for award season. And in case we have any UK viewers watching, it's going to debut, I think, in like early January. Which is not too I mean, you know, for this type of film, it feels odd. But I mean, for award season, it's not too far off course. So, all right. Let me get some more water here, and then we'll review Hamnet. All right. One user here says, always love looking in the background of the vids to see which DVDs are on display. Was wondering if you got anything during the Criterion sale and any recommendations on what are worth it. Oh, yeah. I did get a few from the Criterion sale. Actually, hang on. Let me leave some room here. Let me see what we got here. So I did point out Flow. I got that during the Criterion sale. Flow is definitely worth checking out because there are a lot of animated shorts on the disc from the Latvian studio, well, which was great because I'd never seen any of this stuff. So you get a lot more bang for your buck there. I do have a few on the side here. I think I buried another one there, but these are the other ones I got from the Criterion sale. I got 1984 just because, timely, but also I'd never listened to the. There's a different musical track on here from. Who is it from? I forget what was the original score. I think it's. Yeah, there's two musical scores. I forget which one I saw. Like, there's one from Eurythmics, and there's one from Dominic Maldoni, and I think I've only seen one version, so I can't for the life of me remember which one it was. But I always like checking out different versions of films like that. And then of course I got This Is Spinal Tap just because it's funny and it's one of like the earliest Criterion releases, so it's nice to have that. I unfortunately did not get to see the This Is Spinal Tap sequel that came out this year, unfortunately. But yeah, I have not rewatched this yet, but I gotta soon. But yeah, like 1984 is worth it. Flow is definitely worth it. It's one of the best animated films of last year. But I probably should not tell anyone that it's an Academy Award winning film. I think I also there's one other one I had. I think I had Isle of Dogs, and what was the other one? Let's see, I had Isle of Dogs. Oh, Sorcerer. That's the other one. Yeah. I forgot about that one because I was searching for that for the longest time, because when I went to the Barnes & Noble sales, like everyone grabbed Sorcerer like immediately, because everyone needed themselves some William Friedkin, so that became the hard one to find. In fact, when I was going to the Barnes & Nobles, I went to one where somebody else was in the Criterion section, and they asked me like, "Hey, do you see Sorcerer?" It's like, no, I was looking for Sorcerer. Someone already took it. So that was I'm so glad I got that one though. But yeah, those are the ones I would recommend. If you mean like if you want like something different, I guess well, I put a few different ones here. I put Judex just because it's a weird one. Watership Down. I thought I'd throw in some more animation there. The Samurai is a thriller I cannot get enough of. I love how cool it is. Picked up Island Dogs 2. The poster they added is wicked. Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm always surprised whenever like Criterion adds like those cool little posters. But I'm almost like afraid to hang them up because I love them so much. I don't want to like spoil them or anything. I think Tampopo had like a really good poster that I was very conflicted. Like, man, I really want to hang this up, but I want to like preserve it too because it's got like the essay on the back of it. So. But yeah, in every one of my streams and my video essays, I try to like switch up most of my background here to showcase different films, mostly from the Criterion Collection, just because I like their covers. They're more interesting to look at. Okay, before my voice goes out here, let's get to reviewing Hamlet. In 3, 2, 1. So Hamnet is the latest film from director Chloe Zhao, and it focuses on the life of William Shakespeare and his wife Agnes, and how they dealt with the death of their child Hamnet, and how that carried on into the production of Hamlet. Now, what I love so much about Zhao's productions is that she always has this ability to like tap into like the natural, in the way that she kind of like embraces, the serene quality of nature itself and tries to like tap into something deeper there. And I think that works to the benefit of what she's trying to do with Hamnet here, because what the film is more or less trying to focus on the most is trying to deal with mortality. Even before like the death of Hamnet that inspires William Shakespeare to create his play of Hamlet, you can sense that Agnes wants to be more in touch with her spiritual side and her connection to the earth and other people as well. And a big part of making that type of performance works is who you get in the role, and Jessie Buckley here I think gives one of the best performances of her career. I love the way that she just kind of, she has like this very thoughtful personality that is, that she can go from like being like this powerful force who's wise and almost like has like this like sagely presence when in the wilderness, to just being like fragile and easily broken and just a mess when like tragedy strikes her. But before we get to all that, we do get to see the romance develop between her and William Shakespeare, here played by Paul Mescal, which, it's Paul Mescal. I don't think I have to explain that he gives a really great, nuanced performance here, a very conflicted man. I mean, that's pretty much what I expected from Paul Mescal. But he still does a really good job. I love the way that he plays off Jessie Buckley. They have a very natural rapport with each other, whether they're connecting in the bedroom or just giving them like seductive glances in the forest. There's always, you can feel like this romance between them where it makes sense why they would connect and have children with each other. Even when they have their children too, you see like a family that really does love each other and that kind of like cherish that connection. In particular with Agnes, I loved seeing how Buckley's performance here feels like she wants to like teach her children so many things beyond just like the typical things that she would teach like her daughters, as opposed to William Shakespeare, who teaches Hamnet how to perform like stage combat and stuff like that. She does have this connection where she can share something with all of her children, and how she talks about nature and death and what where spirits might go, and trying to like fathom these tough questions and try to find a way to deal with it. And it's great to see her kind of have these ideas, but also watch as just her soul shatters when trying to deal with the tragedy that strikes in her family. And it strikes in a few ways. Like at one point it strikes when when Hamnet is born with a daughter, and Agnes kind of goes back and forth with like the guilt that she might feel if one of the twins died when they were coming out, and then both of them live. So there's this very conflicting nature about who do you. I do think it is an interesting aspect that comes back to haunt her as the film goes along, where she's very, she's not ready to like let go, or she debates how to let go. And I think it's also kind of interesting how they showcase that aspect of sacrifice within Hamnet, who's played here by Jacoby Juppe. And Hamnet is for one, Hamnet is adorable, but also it's adorable the way that he plays off his twin here, the way that he tries to like switch clothing with her and try to deceive people, and not to mention like the family bond that this whole family has. Like when they're all together, it's very warm and comforting, but there's also this longing that William Shakespeare has for something bigger, where living in the countryside is not enough for him. So you do see that conflict between him and Agnes that feels like a very relatable family drama for how it's staged here. But when tragedy strikes and it feels like William is not as present, you can feel that isolation and frustration and just that broken nature within Agnes through Jessie Buckley. The performance she gives when the moment happens, when Hamnet dies, and you just see her heart tear in half, and you see her break down in the most like emotionally devastating way possible. That's just like you want to cry in that moment right along with her, because I mean, like that's a very powerful moment. You have to sell that hard, and I think Buckley's performance makes that work, especially for how she tries to like move on and deal with it in such a dour setting. Because set here in the English setting, like even like the countryside and the city, there's always like this kind of like dour, dirty, and kind of like earthy presence to it all. And yet it always feels like the film is kind of like daring to find the heart underneath like all the dirt, and like there's like scenes of like the streets flooding, and people are dying of sickness, and just it's like daring you to find the humanity there. And I love how like Agnes struggles to find it, and how William tries to like bring it out through his work as well. It's very moving, a lot of the performances here, especially like the climax of the film, when William Shakespeare finally does put on his production of Hamlet, and Agnes witnesses it for the first time as kind of like this big surprise, as being like as a tribute to their dead child. And the way that it proceeds, and the way that you see Buckley's performance here, which is mostly very little dialogue. It's mostly just her like kind of staring in awe at the performance of this onstage Hamlet here, played by I forget Noah Juppe here, which is very, very fitting for this type of role. The way that she kind of like learns to deal with her grief through this play, and at one point she's just kind of like almost like reaching out to Hamlet, and just kind of like realizing like, yeah, you need to let go, and it's hard, and like we don't know what lies beyond, and it's this very like comforting nature of like William Shakespeare communicating through his art and how he deals with his grief, that Agnes just understands in that moment. It's like I get it now. Like, there is like some healing aspect through art, and I understand, what my husband was trying to do here, but I've also kind of come more to terms with death itself in a way that I didn't previously. And I think it's a fascinating route that Agnes takes here, because she starts the film having this idea that she's very much in tune with nature and mortality, and then having that aspect shaken in her when it's her own children who end up dying too soon, and just realizing how to move on, and how art can help heal some of those wounds, and not in like a very like melodramatic way. Like the scene where she watches the performance, it is just beautiful. It is a very weepy moment. Like, I was sitting right next to a critic who is just, tearing up, tissues in hand, ready for that moment, because man, it rips your heart out. Like, it's a very but it's also a very like serene moment as well. Like it's somber, but it also feels like there's a very deep human connection there to want to understand the unknown and almost like accepting that it is something that we're never going to fully understand, but that we can understand it as best as we can while we're here in this world. So yeah, Jessie Buckley's performance really makes this film come together, and I think it's one of the best performances of the year. Don't get me wrong, Paul Mescal's really good here, but I expected him to be good. He's given a lot of great performances before, but Buckley owns this film. Almost as much as Chloe Zhao's direction and cinematography here, which really does showcase a lot of the beauty where it's present and almost kind of have like this like raw nature to just kind of like pull the camera back and just let this environment and this atmosphere and the family warmth and drama just wash over you in a way that kind of like prevents it from being melodrama. And it really moved me. I think this is very much a tearjerker film, but I think for a film that wants to find a way to like grapple with grief and our own mortality and how we try to deal with that through art, not just through like the play, but even just like the film itself. I think it's beautiful. Like there's that great scene at the end of the film where you're watching Agnes watch Hamlet and realize that there is a way to deal with everything that befalls us in our life. And watching that, it's almost very meta the way that it comes across, because we're also watching her watching a piece of art that is trying to communicate something about death. And it's beautifully moving. I could not stop thinking about that final scene here. So yeah, fantastic performances, and just Chloe Zhao once again really knows how to direct a film that connects on a natural level and a human level, and just fantastic performances all around. So yeah, I really love the hell out of Hamlet, and Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal are fantastic in this film. So Hamnet will be opening in limited release in theaters this Thanksgiving, and will be expanding into theaters on December 12th. And it is definitely, you should, if you're one of those people who keep up with award season, this is a film you need to see, because I guarantee you Jessie Buckley is going to be nominated for Best Actress. She is going to get that nomination. It's that good, okay? I'm telling y'all right now. Let's see. KJX says One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest turned 50 yesterday. Oh, that's right. Yeah. 75. Yeah. Man, it's weird when you look back on like those anniversaries. Well, because especially like Back to the Future just had its 40th anniversary this year. Which reminded me that I am also 40, so that should give you an idea of when I was born. But also, because when I went to go see Zootopia today, I was looking at, there was like this Christmas display or something, and it was celebrating, I don't know how many people are familiar with, what was that? That it's a very old plush toy. It's called like the Santa Bear. I don't know if they still make it. They might, but there was like this big old Dayton celebration event in the mall, and they were celebrating 40 years of Santa Bear. It's like, oh wow, I'm as old as Santa Bear. And the thing is, I actually did have a Santa Bear growing up, so it's very fitting, I guess. Anniversaries are weird. Okay, enough of old man talk. Let me get some more water here and blow through some more films here. I'm glad that I finally covered Hamnet, because I'd been sitting on that film for a month. I could have talked about it at any time, but I'm saving it for the right time, when it was close enough that people might be able to see it. Because I saw it back in October, and I doubt like everyone's gonna be like, oh, where can I see this film? It comes out in October. I think a similar thing happened with the Looney Tunes film, The Day the Earth Blew Up, because we got an early screening for that, and I thought it was going to come out in January, but I think it ended up coming like somewhere closer to like February or March. And so I ended up releasing the review early, and a lot of people were like, where the hell is this film? It's like, it's coming. But But thankfully, Hamlet is coming out. Although I might risk it with this next film, with the Little Amelie. Are you familiar with the YouTube channel Shifterless Productions? I am, yeah. I watched a few of his videos. They're okay. I have nothing against them. I think it's typical YouTuber stuff, you know. I haven't watched any of his recent stuff. All right. Let me get the notes up here for the next one. This one I might risk being too early. Just because it's... Okay, so this is a foreign animation. And it's from G-Kids. And G-Kids... They usually, like, save stuff, like, way too late for, like, the year. We got lucky last year with, like, Flow. Because they actually did have, like, an early release. I think that was G-Kids, I believe. But yeah, G-Kids will always, like, hold off on stuff, like, way too late, so... So I'm hoping that this film will be coming out soon. Just because it really is one of my favorites, so we'll... God, spoiling too much here. Let's get into talking about Little Amelie here in 3, 2, 1. So, Little Amelie, or the character of Rain, is based on the short story of Amelie Nothomb, who was a Belgian girl who grew up in Japan. So a very interesting situation. This very kind of like very autobiographical type of story here of, just of growing up. Now, it's, just first off, beautiful 2D animation here. I love the way that it's set up here. Just very, and it feels like it could be very like whimsical. Like, I love the look of this film. I love the way that it proceeds, how it transitions from scene to scene. But I think what really engrossed me so much about this film is the route it takes with trying to center around the character of Amelie. So Amelie kind of narrates this film as in this belief that she is a god. That, when she was born, I am a god. And I think, for one, yes, it's not meant to be literal. She's not really a god. It's the perspective of children. Children believe that they are in control of everything, even, when they're very young and want to grasp everything. So there's this very kind of, I love the kind of the internal dialogue of Amelie here, the way that she views herself as a god and kind of like chooses when to speak and how she understands aspects of life. And I think this approach, like, for one, yeah, it's a bit humorous, especially when they throw the grandmother of Claude into the mix, when she brings like chocolate around, and that just giving chocolate to Amelie just awakens something in her. It's like she is transcended to a new level in life. It's like, yes, I now understand the beauty in Belgian chocolate to ascend to the next level. And for one, yeah, it's amusing, but in a way, it's also very it's also very mature in the sense that it's taking the child's perspective very seriously here. Like, it doesn't feel like it's trying to dumb down aspects of this character for like an adult audience. It feels very relatable to children who want to be taken seriously and be seen as a much more powerful figure. Because when you look at it from the outside, Amelie just looks like a very, quiet, cute little girl who kind of, slowly learns to talk at a much slower rate than other people. So she's kind of seen as an underdog by the other members of her family. But internally, Amelie sees herself as just like this much bigger force who is much more thoughtful, understands the world better, understands life, understands death, chooses her words wisely, and focuses on aspects of her world that she wants to understand in her own little ways. And yeah, and it's equally amusing and mature at the same time. There's something very beautiful about it, especially as the film goes along. She starts connecting with the nanny hired for them, which is Nishio. And Nishio, like the connection that Amelie has with her is very sweet, because Nishio kind of like is very patient with Amelie. She kind of shows her different like Japanese monsters from books and stuff like that, and she's very open with Amelie. I love the dynamic that develops between them, where it feels like they can talk about anything, because at one point Amelie starts asking questions about Nishio and her family, and Nishio kind of briefly brings up the war. And Amelie starts questioning, okay, what happened during the war, and did your family die? And and Nishio's kind of like, well, yeah. And Nishio, having developed this relationship with Amelie, feels like, yeah, I can be more honest about what went down during the war and how I was buried in rubble and how a lot of people didn't make it, and just be this open with this very little girl in a way that doesn't feel like it's trying to be too traumatic or soften as much of this discussion of mortality, because it does feel like it's an important aspect that Nishio wants to communicate, as much as she focuses on cooking or teaching her how to write in Japanese. She puts as much focus into these very difficult topics to talk about as the easy ones. And that's what makes her such a great kind of like motherly and wise woman to converse with. And it makes it all the more heartbreaking why she would be torn away from Amelie when the mean landlady called Kashima wants to separate Nishio from Amelie, feeling that Amelie should not be hanging out with Nishio because Kashima very much has wounds, emotional wounds left over from the war, where she doesn't want to mix with foreigners or outsiders. So this Belgian family that she's giving a house to, because Amelie's father is a diplomat, she doesn't feel really good about it, and she doesn't want Nishio to connect that much with Amelie, feeling that she's going to betray her country. So very difficult, a very difficult and interesting situation here that Amelie is in, especially when she feels like everything has been taken away from her, and how she feels like her family doesn't understand her. Like, they try, her family at one point recognizes that she takes an interest in fish, but Amelie is really only interested in fish because Nishio kind of made a joke like, oh, the fish kind of look like boys, because Amelie starts realizing, oh yeah, boys are much more celebrated in Japan than women. So fantasizing that these ugly ass fish look like boys is so satisfying to her. And then to have those fish come back to her as a present just feels like the ultimate insult after taking away Nishio from her. Even I was surprised at one point, the film actually goes as far as to have Amelie kind of delve deeper into the spiritual side of herself when she tries to grapple with a death in the family in a very unique way that balances, I think, kind of like the mature and the fantasy of it at the same time. So and for those wondering, yes, the film is cute. It is very adorable. It's quirky, but I think it might surprise people just how mature this film is in depicting a child in a very unorthodox situation that is worth exploring for all the problems that come with the culture clash and how children kind of look at the world, especially from Amelie's perspective, which doesn't feel the same as her brother and sister here. It feels like she's growing up in a much different environment with a much different life, and kind of struggles to understand the world in a way that is both understandable, heartbreaking, and has its moments of joy at times. So very beautiful film, like both the way that it looks and the way that it's told. Just a very beautiful, mature story that I think that is very essential, I think, for children to watch, especially for how much agency Amelie is given. That it very much reminded me of of Hayao Miyazaki's films, where kids get to take center stage and control more of their story here, and that's very much the case with little Amelie here. So yeah, I was just amazed and just very, very charmed by little Amelie, or the character of Rain, for presenting a very admirable depiction of a cartoon kid that you just want to love. You got a very good feeling about Amelie as the film goes along. You really want to see what she does next in life. So yeah, I absolutely love the hell out of little Amelie. So, little Amelie, or the character of Rain, should be coming out soon. I don't think there's a date for it yet. But it should be coming up soon. I think probably around January or February there. Like G-Kids should set a date for it. If they haven't already. They should set a date for this film because no joke, this is my favorite animated film of the year. And I don't know if that's spoiling anything for Zootopia 2 review coming out next week, but take from that what you will. But yeah, it's going to be hard to beat a film like that. I really loved it. And I'm hoping that it'll open soon so that it can have a little bit of momentum the way that Flow did from last year. Because who would think like a CGI film from Latvia would have that much of an impact to win the Academy Award here? I think, given how barren this year has been for great animated films, I think it'd be a great time for Little Amelie to come in and swoop it up. I think G-Kids is sitting on something really powerful here. So, here's hoping that Little Amelie comes out soon, because I think everybody needs to see this film. It's absolutely adorable, beautiful to watch, mature storytelling. You can watch it with the family. And I think that'll probably be a big selling point. Just, a great animated film you can watch with the family that doesn't feel like trash. And speaking of which, we're about to take a massive dip in quality here. So, let me mint up for this. Got some Tic Tacs here just to lubricate my throat here. But yeah, quick little recap while I get the mint going through my mouth here. Quick recap. So, Wicked, Too Good. Not Too Good. For Good. Wait, did I write Too Good? No, I did write For Good. Good. I didn't make a mistake. I made that mistake last time with The Long Walk. I said like The Last Walk. So yeah, quick update. So, Hamnet will be in theaters on Thanksgiving. Limited release, so look for Art House. Outside of that, it'll come out on December 12th wide. Wicked for Good is going to open wide this Friday. And Little Amelie does not have a date yet. Which is tragic, because it should. Because I would love to direct everyone to go see that film immediately. Especially if you've been underwhelmed by the animated films this year. Which I will admit, I have been. In terms of the mainstream commercial animated films, yeah. They've been very dissatisfying. Like, I liked Elio, but it's definitely not Pixar's best. So yeah, but that's the good thing though. If the commercial animated films are not working, hey, there are plenty of independent animated films out there around the world that you could pluck from, and Little Amelie is one of them. There actually are a few more from around the world that I haven't covered yet, but I will. And I will probably get to them in December. I actually might get to a few by next Tuesday. Actually, that might be a good idea. I might try to wrap in a few other animated films into the next review stream next Tuesday, since we are going to be reviewing Zootopia 2. Okay, let's rip off this Band-Aid. Let's talk about In Your Dreams. In 3, 2, 1. So, In Your Dreams is the latest animated film to grace Netflix, from director Alex Wu, who was previously a Pixar story artist, and this is Alex's directorial debut with In Your Dreams. Now, what I find kind of fascinating, because last year we did get an animated film around this time from Netflix called Spellbound, which was about a family trying to deal with divorce. And In Your Dreams is on a similar subject as well. It's about a family concerned that they're going to split up. So I don't know if there was some restraint at Pixar where they said you can't do films about divorced families, and that a lot of the people who worked at Pixar really wanted to do a story about a divorced family. And now they can, now that they go over to Netflix. But yeah, it's a weird trend that I've noticed here. But it's not quite the same as Spellbound, because In Your Dreams centers on like a much more fantastical and almost like too safe of a premise. So the entire film centers around Stevie and Elliot, two siblings living in Minnesota, in a Minnesota suburb, and they're concerned that, you know, their ideal life with their mom and dad, who are voiced by Simu Liu and Kristen Milotti, who are never given names. They're just called Mom and Dad throughout this. The children are worried that their folks are going to split up. Well, Stevie the younger teenager, Stevie the older sibling here is most worried, while Elliot is just kind of in his own world, obsessed with his plush toys and his baloney and all this weird, you know, little kid stuff like that. Yeah. So Stevie, even though Stevie does have her own little obsession with the handsome boy in town called Chad, voiced by Sung-Won Cho, in a decent bit of a, you know, deadpan comedic performance here. But Stevie is worried. She's worried that her parents are going to split up because they've been having closed door fights about money. And not big fights, just kind of like concerns and just like a realization that maybe they should take some time off. Maybe they should be apart. There's a concern that mom will move up to Duluth and leave her kids behind, or the kids might have to choose. Like there's definitely divorce in the air. And that's what worries Stevie. But Stevie thinks there might be a way to fix this, because she comes across this weird spell book which allows her to interact more with her dreams and combine her powers with Elliot. So Stevie and Elliot both occupy the same dreams when they go to sleep. And not only that, they have a power where if they can stay in the dream long enough, like they don't get terrified where they want to wake up immediately, they can go further and further into the dream world, where they can meet the Sandman, voiced by Omid Djalali, voiced by Omid Djalali. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. So they want to find the Sandman because the Sandman has the ability to make your dreams become a reality. So the ultimate wish that Stevie wants is that she wants her folks to remain together forever and never split up. Now, of course, you know, this is very much a monkey's paw wish in which something is going to go wrong here, and it's fairly predictable the route that it takes for wanting to make this wish come true. And it ultimately ends up with Elliot trying to save her sister by going deeper into the dream world and fighting the Sandman. Now, the idea for the film itself, I don't think is entirely bad. I think there's a lot of potential here. The problem is a lot of it is squandered on very easy theatrics and comedy here, because when you're going to the dream world, I think there's a lot to focus on. I think, you know, a film like Inception made the idea of going into dreams very exciting and very interesting. But the dreams of Stevie and Elliot are kind of like basic. And I know that like children have weird dreams, but, you know, there's dreams about an entire town of breakfast food, or there's a nightmare about a hot dog that eats people. There's the standard being naked in public type of dreams, you know, all the standard cliches of dreams. And the more that I kept going along, they tried to come up with different scenarios here, but I just felt like this can't be all there is. Like, because a lot of this just feels like cliches that are trying to, you know, present themselves in an easy manner that children would be able to grasp onto. And I think that some kids would be able to relate to it. I think they also can find a little bit of funny stuff to do in, you know, like there's some funny elements to like a whole town of like sentient breakfast food, like Stevie being impressed with like a sausage dog and licking the greasy sausage dog a little bit. It kind of funny, like, okay, it's a decent bit, but it never really goes much further than that. And the film really does fall back on a lot of toilet humor through Elliot, which, don't get me wrong, toilet humor is fine, and it was pretty tame in this film, but I feel like you need a little something more than that. And there isn't a lot of there isn't a lot of like comedic backup in this film. Like, you do have Craig Robinson voicing Elliot's plush toy of Baloney Tony, kind of a funny name. And Craig Robinson, I think, does his best with this material here. He does have a pretty comical delivery, but he's mostly just there for exposition on the dream world and a few lowbrow punchlines about like farting lasers all over the place, which is it's funny for like the first few seconds, but the more that it keeps going along, the more that we keep getting fart jokes. Elliot and Baloney Tony are just kind of, they're just impressed by any time there's a fart gag, which there are a lot here. And they're just kind of they just look at the farts and just like, oh, that's nice. That's my brand of humor. I love that that's here. Which, okay, fine. Yeah, a little bit of farts here. Not too shabby, but there's got to be something more here. There's got to be more to Elliot's gross out obsessions and Stevie's fascination with boys and their weird little dreams that they concoct. There's got to be more to this dream world. Especially, it becomes very underwhelming when they get to the Sandman. And let me put it this way. The Sandman has 2 different musical numbers here. And you can probably guess which 2 songs the Sandman uses for his sequences. I'll give you a hint. Sand is in the lyrics. And you've probably guessed what they are. And the film just uses them and doesn't really put much of its own flair on it. It just kind of like, oh yeah, this is the predictable music that you would put over this scene. But what really kind of irked me about this film, which really took me out of it, was that it really didn't feel like there were stakes here. Because by the time we get to the sequence where the Sandman has to be stopped, Elliot relies on mom and dad to come into the dream world. And by that point, the conflict is pretty much over. Like, there's no question that mom and dad are going to stick together here. And mostly on a thematic level, I kind of understand it because there is this element to family where, family might bicker and they might fight, but when an emergency arises, they will spring into action and they will be there for each other. And that's what kind of matters most. But they arrive at that moment by having mom and dad help go into the dream world and fight Sandman in a way that it's like, it's some like okay slapstick, but it feels like a very predictable route for where they're going here. And not to mention the ultimate resolve where it's revealed that mom and dad are not actually going to get divorced. It feels like it's softening so much of the material here and not really dealing with the idea that your parents might be fighting and divorcing. So it doesn't really give kids much to munch on here emotionally and develop them. Like, because I really didn't dig Spellbound from last year, but I will give the film this. It did have the guts to go ahead with addressing divorce and having kids realize that, it's not the end of the world if your parents get divorced. You can deal with it. Your parents still love you. There is a way to get by and to still have a connection to family and to siblings as well. Because I honestly thought that's the route this film was going to go. I thought it was going to end with mom and dad getting divorced and then Stevie kind of coming to terms with that and also kind of being there for her sibling as well. And I felt like, that was the one key factor. Like, having siblings amid a divorce is a very interesting angle to pursue that I thought could give kids something, give the kids something more that they could latch onto and see themselves in this film, especially for kids of divorce. I think it would give them something more. But the fact that it softens it and mom and dad stick together and everything is right with the world by the end, I felt like the film just pushed out. It's too soft. It's too safe. There doesn't really feel like there's any stakes here. Even when it gets to the point where Sandman is trapping Stevie in the dream world, it feels like, oh, well, you just need to go back into the dream world and stop Sandman, which is this very comical slapstick sequence, and that'll resolve everything. So yeah, In Your Dreams is a film that it feels like it should be about something bigger, and it just kind of falls back on simple animation theatrics and doesn't really explore much of a conflicted family with the drama there. It doesn't find much cleverness in the dream world. It doesn't even have that much funny stuff to do with a character called Baloney Tony, voiced by Craig Robinson. So yeah, In Your Dreams just feels like wasted potential for all the possibilities that it has and just squanders. So In Your Dreams is currently playing on Netflix, if you care to watch. I get the feeling for a lot of for those of you who might be going home to see family and they're probably going to throw stuff on for the kids, something on Netflix, watch out for this one. There's better. Go find The Wild Robot. It's a much better animated film to put on than in your dreams. Would fart dreams be more appropriate? I would honestly like a dream if there's just nothing but farts. Just get all the fart jokes out of the way immediately in one big blast of gas. Just get them out of the way early. I would like that more. All right, where are we at right now? Okay, we have one more film. Okay, I gotta get some water here because we're gonna take a massive total shift here. Actually, you know what? I need to. Wait, I had like a different film I was gonna review here, wasn't I? I was gonna do Being Eddie. That's right. Very briefly. I'll cover it once I can get this open here. There we go. Yeah, because we got 2 more documentaries to cover. If that's your jam. One is on Netflix and one will be coming out later this year. Okay. So I'm going to kind of go through these. I'm going to go through these very quick because I don't have too much to say on them. All right, so here's a review of Being Eddie in 3, 2, 1. So Being Eddie is the Netflix documentary on Eddie Murphy. And, to the film's benefit, I do think it's interesting how Eddie Murphy is not that... It's not that, like, rocky of a celebrity. Eddie Murphy doesn't really have the same type of celebrity story where, he fell off, he tumbled into sex and drugs or conflicting relationships or he drank a lot. In fact, Eddie Murphy confesses that he doesn't really drink and that he never really tried marijuana until he was in his 30s. So I think there's definitely this very sobering element to portraying Eddie Murphy as just this kind of like very docile guy. Because when the filmmakers here of director Angus Wall go to interview Eddie Murphy in his lavish estate, he's just very casual. When talking about his past, he just kind of like speaks with just this very easygoing attitude and a smile on his face. Like at one point, he points out a photo on the wall of him and Charlie Murphy. And he says, you know what? This is the photo that actually kind of broke up my parents' marriage. Because we got this photo taken, and then we came home, and my father was angry at my mother. And he's like, you spent money on pictures? And he has like this laugh and this smile on his face the whole time. Where it's just like kind of like, he just kind of accepts. It's like, yeah, that happened. And he's totally cool about it. He's not conflicted about it. He doesn't seem traumatized by it. He's just like, yeah, I mean, that's what happened in my life. And there's a lot of moments like that throughout this documentary when he's talking about recounts of his life, especially when they talk with Charlie Murphy, who gives like a little bit more of insight about how like Charlie was kind of like more like the guy who stuck up for his brother and defended him. Like Charlie has some pretty good interviews in the film, but I found it interesting how like because like for those who have watched the Chappelle Show, you're probably familiar with Charlie Murphy from telling his stories about interacting with like Rick James in the 80s when Eddie Murphy was like a big celebrity and stuff like that. And Eddie Murphy does bring it up, and his only commentary about like the story of like Rick James and like the assault that went on during those meetings was just like, yeah, that was every day. that's the life that I lived. And it's kind of, this documentary is kind of frustrating because Eddie Murphy is so charming, but he's also so bereft of drama or anything like that. Like, he's so serene that there are so many scenes in this film where it has like this awkwardness that like the filmmakers just came to Eddie's house trying to like find some drama, find some interesting aspect of his life that not many people knew about, try to find like something scandalous, maybe catch him off guard, have him address like a dark history, a dark past, a point where he felt at his lowest. And there's just like, there's nothing there. And you can just like feel like Murphy just kind of like smirking along, just being like, I don't know what y'all are looking for here, but you probably ain't going to find much. But hey, have at it. If you want to recount my life, you want to do a documentary on me, sure, go for it. But I think that's the problem with this film. It's like Eddie just feels like such a nice guy to hang out with. Even like the actors who talk about him, they all just talk about him as a guy who just kind of like almost kind of coasted through life. Because yeah, like a lot of people will bring up like, yeah, he did some terrible movies, like, you know, The Adventures of Pluto Nash and stuff like Norbit and stuff like that. But when he took like his little sabbatical from acting, it was just like Eddie Murphy realizing, yeah, you know, I haven't been doing any films that are that great, so I'm gonna pull back for a while. But everyone thought like he was gonna be done with movies, but no. And then in 2019 he came back with My Name Is Dolomite, and then he guest starred on Saturday Night Live, and it wasn't treated as some like big comeback special, or, you know, like as a realization that, you know, oh, I feel lost, I gotta get back out there, I gotta revitalize myself. It was just Eddie Murphy realizing, oh yeah, I should probably get off the couch. I should do a little something just so everyone realizes that I'm not out of action. I was just taking a break, just, you know, doing my own thing, and, you know, I could get back into doing movies if I wanted to. And sure enough, he has, and the movies that he has been doing since have not really been good, if I'm being honest. Like, he's done films like You People, which was a very stumbling racial comedy with Jonah Hill. And this year he had a buddy comedy with called The Pickup with Pete Davidson. Not good either. But you know what? I get the feeling that because of Eddie Murphy's easygoing nature, he probably wouldn't mind that these films are terrible, because he's Eddie Murphy. He can do his own thing. You know, he's kind of made his mark. He's successful enough, and now he's just kind of like, hey, I can try stuff. You know, I can do movies if I want to. I can go on television if I want to. I can go back to my old stomping ground of Saturday Night Live if I wanted to. And every moment where it feels like there should be some tension there, where there should be like some fall off there, where, you know, Murphy kind of regrets his decisions. Like at one point he brings up Vampire in Brooklyn, where he realizes, like, yeah, that was silly. You know, I'm playing a vampire, I'm sinking my fangs into Angela Bassett. Yeah, this is getting a little silly. And it's just not working. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, dude, you got to sink your fangs into Angela Bassett. That's not every actor can say they did that. But then when he got roasted on Saturday Night Live by David Spade, he's kind of like, ah, damn, that kind of stung. Like, and it's not, he didn't hold any grudge against like David Spade or anything like that. It's just kind of like, ah, man, my old stomping ground. They're roasting me. That's not as good. And I get the feeling that Eddie has this vibe to him where it's he just takes any role that he likes, and that if it's good, it's good. And there's a little bit of relief that he feels there. Like at one point, you know, he voiced Donkey in Shrek, and he's just like, oh yeah, that was a great film. Everyone celebrated that, and it's nice to be in a good film like that. Which, of course, you recognize, like, yeah, you do go into every film hoping that it is going to be good. Because I feel like every actor does that, and I don't think anybody kind of keeps that in mind, especially for someone like Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy could choose the stuff that he wanted to do. It didn't really feel like he was that desperate for roles at the time. So, you know, so being able to have that freedom makes it I think the terrible films sting a little bit less. Not to mention, like, the fact that you have other interviews from people chiming in here, like Dave Chappelle and Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock, who have all been, you know, they've all had their controversies here. You know, compared to them, Eddie Murphy looks like golden. Like, there's nothing all that controversial in his past. Like, even, like, oh, you made a few bad films? Like, that's nothing compared to, like, you know, the shit that Dave Chappelle and Jerry Seinfeld have said before. So, yeah, it's like Eddie's too nice, I think, to, like, make a very revealing documentary, especially with all the nice things that everyone says about him. Like, there is some good interviews here from, like, people like Arsenio Hall, who brings up how people tried to look at Eddie Murphy as the next Richard Pryor, and recognizing that, look, that's too divisive. You know, comparing Eddie Murphy to Richard Pryor, you know, they both have different forms of, yeah, obviously Murphy was inspired by a lot of what Pryor did and how he was a trailblazer. Murphy was on that same level too, but the fact that it seems like they were pitted against each other just seemed very unfair, and kind of like showcased how the pool of like black actors and comedians was so small that there would be that easy comparison. I think that would be an interesting angle to focus on, but we don't spend too much time on that. And I doubt that Eddie Murphy would want to spend too much time on it either. And then you have people like Pete Davidson who just gush about him Like, he'll just gush about how he loved Eddie Murphy as Shrek and how he put on Eddie Murphy's Raw, and his parents was like, "Oh, you're watching the stand-up that has so much profanity in it." Which it feels like Pete Davidson was reenacting that scene from Me, Myself, and Irene, where Jim Carrey's character puts on Eddie Murphy Raw for his boys, and it's just profanity laden, and he's like, I don't know if I should let my kids watch this, but I guess I will. It's the same. I'm honestly surprised that the film didn't bring up that clip, because it feels like the perfect time to showcase it. So I went back and forth in this film. Like, it was interesting to see Eddie Murphy's legacy, but also just like the docile nature of it all. How Eddie Murphy was just really not that controversial and just very, very at peace with himself and his career. I think is both interesting and at the same time not that interesting for a documentary topic. I think I think the filmmakers went into this project hoping that Eddie Murphy would reveal something more about himself and talk about like more of his controversies and regret and his family splitting up and his relationship with Charlie Murphy. And it doesn't really go into much of that. It just kind of reveals Eddie Murphy as this easygoing guy that I honestly think that the director should have just taken a different route here and just kind of just hung out with Eddie for a while in his most natural state and see if anything interesting slips out or any different part of his character could be revealed there. Because even if it didn't, it would just be fun just to hang out with Eddie Murphy, especially with the way that the other comedians describe him as just this guy who's obsessed with like YouTube videos and looking up his old clips and listening to like different forms of music and occasionally playing instruments here and there, and his obsession with cats. Just all these little things I found interesting about him that I would have loved to just hang out more with him instead of recounting his legacy, because it's mostly just Eddie Murphy like just saying like, yep, I did that. Yeah, that was a bad film. That was a good film. I like doing this film. It's like it feels very much like that Saturday Night Live bit where Chris Farley was interviewing celebrities, just like, hey, remember when you were in this film? That was cool. And it feels like Eddie Murphy is doing that here, but he's the celebrity leading that interview, just doing that here. Just like saying like, yeah, I was in that film. That was cool. I was in this film. This film sucked. And not much more than that. So yeah, if you want like a decent recount of Eddie Murphy's filmography, the film is fine. But if you were hoping that they were going to reveal about him more as a person, I think they don't unearth much here. Past just being like a very sweet, sincere, and quiet guy, which was nice to learn, but didn't exactly make for the best documentary. So Being Eddie is currently streaming on Netflix. Sucked says the light rock songs amongst the family boarding scenes ruined the movie for me, which watching it with my girlfriend, nieces, and nephews loved. Yeah, there are some needle drops there. Yeah, especially when I said like the Sandman stuff. I don't even want to say the songs just because it's embarrassing. You've seen it, you know the songs I'm talking. Even if you haven't, you know the Sandman songs I'm talking about. Hobo Films LLC said, yeah, Eddie made Boogie in Your Butt is one of the best songs ever recorded. I forgot did Boogie. He does actually cover that in the film. Yeah, Boogie in Your Butt. And what's the other one? Party All the Time. My girl wants to party all the time. Party all the time. Party all the time. Fascinating lyrics, that song. It's weird because I almost want the film to interview like mean people who would actually like, spit back. I wish they interviewed David Spade. I would have loved to hear what he would say about his thoughts on Eddie Murphy here. But I feel like the film is just trying to be too gentle with Eddie, and it really shouldn't. Because Eddie's... I get the feeling nobody wants to like address the darker aspects of him, because there are none. But it almost feels like what's even the point? What's even the point of talking about it? Just list off like he's a comedy legend. What more can you say? he's not even as bad as Richard Pryor. Like Pryor had his problems and his controversies, and he conflicted with a lot more people. I think that's like the biggest divide, is that Richard Pryor was much more vocal and risque, and he set himself on fire. I mean, there's a lot more wild stuff to Pryor than there is to Eddie. So, which is saying something given his comedy bits, All right, might bring things down here a little bit. I'm only going to talk about this briefly because this is a bit of a hard film to talk about. So this is like a very, I honestly might start tearing up if I talk about this for too long. So I gotta keep this a little bit short here, but it is an important film I want to address. So we'll talk about it. All right. So here we go with our last review of the stream in 3, 2, 1. So Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk is a very low-budget documentary from director Sepideh Farsi, who interviewed photojournalist Fatima Hassana, who was covering the Gaza war when Israel was attacking Gaza City, both before and after the events of October 7th. And I found, now this is a very simplistic documentary, because the whole film is shot from Farsi's camera, where she's filming her own camera, not recording the footage off her phone, but with a different, I think different camera, recording her video conversations with Fatima, and how she's dealing with being in Gaza when it's being bombed, and how resources are dwindling, and how there's no way out, and how she feels trapped in covering this very important conflict going on in the world. And what's most interesting about these many conversations is that Fatima, she is always seen on camera just smiling, even when the situation is dire. Just like her conversations with Farsi are always, it always feels like there's this chipper nature to her, even among all the problems, not just like the conflict that's going on within Gaza, but also the internet connection keeps dropping out. Like audio will drop, the connection will drop. Sometimes they'll just have to send instant messaging, audio files back and forth to each other before they can find a good connection. But when they do connect, there's almost like this this kind of like comfort between the two, because Fatima she always has this big smile on her face. Like she's facing the hardest times. There's bombings all around her. She could die at any moment. There's not that much to eat. There's constant danger. And here she is just in front of the camera, smiling, trying to describe the situation. And I think she's just cherishing that human connection she can have with the outside world at that time. Because, she's very much used to documenting war itself. And I think just being able to take a break from it and connect with somebody, even when it is still talking about the conflict, I think makes her story so compelling. And I think for gaining the perspective of Farsi's perspective here is that she doesn't just film the video calls, but she also films the news. In several scenes, she has her phone off to the side with the video call, and the background has news reports about Israel's attacks on Gaza at the time. So she's kind of keeping track of everything on the television while at the same time trying to get in touch with someone who is experiencing it there. And I think what really shook me about this presentation is that, well, for one, it's no frills. There's not much dramatic music here. There's a few sequences where they show photos coming out of Gaza from the destruction that highlight what Fatima was experiencing, sometimes laced with a poem to make it mean a little bit more, and some music here and there, but not much music used at all. And I think for showcasing it from Farsi's perspective, it feels very relatable, because a lot of us who are trying to learn about the conflict and how Gaza is kind of going through this genocide with Israel attacking them, we're kind of just experiencing it from the outside. And we see that in how Farsi will try to get in touch with someone from there, but also just watch the news, try to attend to stuff in the different locations that she visits, like, just closing the doors or letting the cats in her home, and then just trying to like relate to Fatima, because like sometimes their conversations will go back to Farsi and her time in the Middle East and how she was trying to escape it, and how like her and her family dealt with aspects of revolution and conflict as well. So there's very much a big connection that she has with Fatima here that I think comes across well, especially for like a film where there's a lot of time where they can't quite hear each other, or the audio will drop out, or the video will drop, or the internet connection will be terrible, and just it's frustrating, but it's also believable. And I think the fact that Farsi doesn't try to like play it up with theatrics here. There's no talking heads. She never gets perfectly in front of the camera. There's no like heightened music or editing here to make it seem grander than it is. And I think this runs in sharp contrast to because I have seen a lot of documentaries on the Israeli side about how Israel was attacked by Hamas and how they tried to deal with it, and the aftermath that came after it. And it was very heightened, very emotional, very tightly edited. It was narrated in such a way to like tell a story, and it did showcase the terror that went on there, but it also lacked the context of what Gaza was going through and how Palestinians were going through a genocide. Like, I've seen a lot of Israeli documentaries that just pretty much like do not look at that aspect. And so to actually have a documentary that looks at it from the Gaza side, the fact that it is very no frills and not trying to like present this heightened reality, especially for the tragic fact that Fatima did not survive. Like, you're pretty much seeing the last conversations between her and Farsi, and it is especially heartbreaking when you get to the end of it, especially when like Farsi will preface the final interview by saying, yes, this is the final time that I talk with Fatima. Like, this is the last time I speak before she is killed in the chaos of Israel's attacks. And it hits you on such an emotional level, but also with just for being so simple. Like, it's not trying to heighten it. Like, there isn't like some, there isn't like a portrait of Fatima that is zoomed in on as Farsi narrates and says like, this was the last time I spoke with her, as somber music comes in. It's just, here's the last conversation in subtitle form, and then it gets to the end, black screen, subtitles, Fatima and all these people were killed in this assault. Bam, the end. It hits you hard, and it's so simplistic, and I think that's what makes it work so well, is because I've seen a lot of these Israeli documentaries that talk about the attacks about Hamas and then do not talk about the genocide in Gaza, and just kind of like cover it up with just all the emotional anger and the fear that is within like the Jewish community within Israel, and never even address what is happening over in Gaza. And to have a documentary focusing on that and just being very bare bones, low budget, scrappy, and focusing on one life of somebody who is in that scenario and face the horrors of that situation, I think perfectly communicates how dire a situation it was in Gaza in a way that is very that it sadly feels very relatable, that someone like Fatima would want to like keep up that face, and why Farsi would also want to, keep their conversations a little bit chipper, because it was not a good situation at all. And you just kind of want to try to find some way to connect with people and just try to realize that there's more in the outside world than just the devastation. There is like a human connection there. And I think, yeah, put your soul on, sorry, I screwed up the name here, and I don't want to screw it up here. Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk is just, it's a gut-wrenching documentary, just for how simplistic it is and how it doesn't try too hard with theatrics to make you care about the devastation that is going on in Gaza, especially for someone who is really trying to do important work in documenting all the atrocities and horrors that shouldn't go unnoticed here. And the fact that Fatima was able to get this tribute paid to her during her final days with Sepideh Farsi really coming through here with a documentary that showcases the raw conversations that just have like this terror underneath, but also this human connection. Just it's such a fascinating documentary, and definitely one of the more important documentaries about the devastation that's going on in Gaza. So yeah, this was an absolutely heartbreaking film for just how simple it was. It ripped my heart. It ripped my heart out, this film. So yeah, I really loved Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk. So that was hard to get through. I hope I kept my tears back there, but yeah. Put your soul on your hand and walk, which is she talks about how it is going through the streets of Gaza. That's the saying she uses. It should be coming out later this year. I think it might have released in a few places, but if not, keep an eye out for it. It's from it's under Keener Lober, so it might not get a wide release, but keep an eye out for it. It's definitely worth watching. Hobo Film says, sounds like a real necessary gut punch. It is. And let me tell you, I had actually, a few days ago, before I watched the film, I had actually watched a documentary on the Israeli attack by Hamas called Soul of a Nation. And I could tell it was trying to come from a good place, but it was also, not really addressing all the devastation in Gaza. It brings it up at one point, because the film does want to be about unity, but it also doesn't address much of the devastation in Gaza. It acknowledges it, but not to the degree that I think it warrants here. It really feels like there is a lack of that insight here. Not to mention, I saw a really terrible one earlier this year called October 8th, which just addressed the Free Palestine people being people who are all against Jews. They want to destroy Jews. It's like, no, it's straight up Zionist propaganda. There's no other way to look at it than that, because they literally engage in horseshoe theory by saying that people who are progressive are actually very far right and they want to persecute Jews. It's like, really, dude, really? You're gonna go that? And it should be worth noting, they do not interview anybody who is advocating for a free Palestine. In that, it is only Jewish voices talking about it, and they're only talking about one side of the issue in a way that is really, if you're not going to address where this is all coming from, it's just going to stoke more hate. And I think you got to be honest with it. You can't hide that stuff, and that's why I'm really glad that there was a documentary like this, because it does really feel important, and the fact that it's no frills means that it's easier to accept the heartbreak and the power that went into, being this gutsy and documenting Gaza and, losing your life to being in that situation. It doesn't try to heighten it. It's a very scrappy documentary from an independent filmmaker. I mean, she's done some notable works. So, her films have gone to Cannes and stuff like that, but she's not. She's working with very limited materials here, and I think it's very reflective. It does reflect a lot of what we're going through right now and how we try to deal with these problems across the world. And I think there's always that questioning of, have we done enough, and what can we do? And here's someone who does have a direct connection to someone in Gaza, and all they can do is just have nice conversations about what their day is like and what's going on there, and how they're dealing with the devastation and what else is happening in the world. It feels like catching up, and it's like you almost want it to be catching up and not just like a report from within a war-torn area. Suck says the right-wing stuff seems also very corporate-minded in keeping the status quo. Very much so. Very much so. All right. Let me get some water here, and then let's do a quick review of the films that I reviewed on today's program live stream. So I got some Siskel and Ebert on the brain. We reviewed Wicked for Good, a sequel to the first Wicked film, which is not as good because it becomes more thematically adrift and doesn't have as many catchy songs or nice set pieces to really bring this story to a close and not just feel like it's sticking to the status quo. Very underwhelming musical. But then I also reviewed Hamnet, the story of Agnes Shakespeare and how she dealt with the death of her son and how a play might be the one way to heal the wounds. Fantastic performance from Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal. Watch it when it comes out this Thanksgiving or on December 12th when it expands into theaters. Jessie Buckley is definitely going to be a big top contender for Best Actress this year. Really enjoyed this heartbreaking film. I also reviewed Little Amelie, or the character of Rain, about a Belgian girl living in Japan and learning all about the devastation of the war that preceded her and how to deal with death and the cultural clash, and just seeing everything through a child's eyes who believes that they're much bigger than the world thinks they are. Adorable 2D animation, fantastic mature storytelling, loved the hell out of this film. I reviewed Being Eddie, the documentary on Eddie Murphy, which reveals a very interesting portrait of Eddie as this very easygoing type of comedian, but at the same time, there's not enough here where it feels like it warranted a documentary. I honestly would have been more okay if the film just hung out with Eddie in his home, instead of trying to get all these people talking about how Eddie was a visionary, when in truth, it just feels like he was a guy who wanted to tell some jokes and just occasionally went in and out of the frame every now and then. I also reviewed In Your Dreams, the latest animated film from Netflix, from a former Pixar story artist. Another film that tries to address family conflict with divorce, except this film doesn't have the guts to go forward and address that aspect of divorce, and the dream worlds that it goes into are just too soft and safe for a film that felt like it could have been about so much more. And finally, I reviewed Put Your Soul in Your Hand and Walk, a devastating low-budget documentary on documenting a woman inside Gaza City who was being a photojournalist and lost her life during that time, and her final conversations are recorded in this documentary. Very heartbreaking and touching film about someone doing important work in the world and really showcasing the devastation in Gaza in a way that I don't think I've seen any documentary do in quite some time, especially with a lot of the Israeli documentaries I've been getting recently. So, if you'd like to read some of these reviews, most of them are up on my website, movieswithmark.com. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest films, you're going to want to subscribe to this channel, especially so that you can stay up to date on the latest films for next week, because next week is Thanksgiving and Zootopia 2 is coming out, and I'm going to have an early review of that. I have already seen Zootopia 2, but it's under embargo until Tuesday. So is it good or not? I could say now, but I won't, because the embargo is on Tuesday. So if you want to hear my thoughts on that, be sure to tune in next week. So make sure that you're subscribed. And if you want people to know about smaller documentaries like Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk, and also films that they should be seeing this award season like Hamnet coming out later this year, be sure to like this video so that everybody knows about films like this. We got tons of films coming up next. I got Zootopia coming up and a whole bunch of screeners to go through to decide what we should talk about next week. I talked about quite a few this week, but there's going to be a lot more coming down the pike. So much more. I'm also working on some new video essays right now. I finished a few scripts. I think the next one is going to be on Margaret Thatcher. I wanted to cover The Iron Lady and how it's like propaganda similar to the Reagan movie, but in a different way. So that's going to be coming up hopefully next week. I'll see if I can get around to recording it. And I also have a few other video essays that are going to be coming up that I'm planning on having for December. In particular, I want to talk about Jingle All the Way. At one point, I am going to get to covering Melanie Mack, who is another one of the anti-woke grifters. I did find like an interesting angle that I'm trying to explore with and how it relates to Christianity, because Melanie Mack is very much fancies herself a Christian because she does read from the Bible and stuff like that. And I thought it'd be interesting to cover a little bit of that and how she addresses that in film. So I'll see if I can find a good angle for through there. And also, I wanted to have a little bit of a special thing for the holiday season and talk about the Siskel and Ebert holiday gift guides that they would do for a few years on their Siskel and Ebert show. Just because I really like those specials and I think there's some fun stuff to react to it. So there's a few different types of videos that I'm going to be working on for December. So if you'd like to get early access to some of them, I do actually have a thumbnail up for my patrons over on Patreon. You can subscribe over there to get early access to videos and also some books. So if you would like to receive some books, the holiday season's coming up, you can subscribe on Patreon to get either a digital copy of my book under the $3 tier or a physical copy under the $15 tier, which if you do that, it's a good deal because my latest book on the history of Saturday morning cartoons, it's a $22 book, and if you sign up on Patreon for $15, you can get that book sent to you for only $15. So, and also, when I finish my next book, you can also get that as well. So all my $15 patrons, you will get a physical copy when that book is finished, which I'm hoping is going to be next month. I've been struggling with it, but I'm going to get to it. So, yeah, be sure to tune in next week where we will be talking about Zootopia 2 and a few other films that are going to be coming out this December. So, like this video, subscribe for more movie reviews, check out the Patreon, and I will see y'all next time. So, until Tuesday, have a good one, everybody.